One thing that reminds me of today is the 30th anniversary of my ordination. So I'm very kind of excited about that. That's, all the other years didn't seem to matter to me. All of a sudden, this is like, wow, this is like a real thing, you know. So, um, but before I met JR, for about 10 years, I studied with the Mevlevi dervishes, and the Mevlevi dervishes are the Sufis or dervishes, which is the mystical sect of the Islamic religion, and the Mevlevi dervishes follow the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi. And it was really a wonderful experience, and uh, I got to meet some amazing Sufi sheikhs that are the teachers, and so I'll share some of my experiences and my discovery of Rumi and some of the other things, the techniques and the teachings that would go along with that. The Mathnawi is a book that Rumi wrote that is his spiritual teachings. And it is considered a poem, but it is a 6-volume poem that goes on with many stories, all, similar to how in the Bible they tell stories. Jesus told stories to communicate the teachings. So in the Islamic religion, there is what the beginning of, not the exact, near the very beginning of the Quran, and the beginning of the Mathnawi is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And this means in the name of God, the most merciful and the most compassionate, the most gracious and the most beneficial. Different interpretations use some of these words. I don't particularly like the merciful part because it kind of implies something is wrong. He's forgiving us, which I guess is true. We're going to go to the beginning of the Mathnawi, this is the opening of the Mathnawi, and it's real. I just love this. And it's in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. This is the book of the Mathnawi, which is the roots of the roots of the roots of the religion in respect of its unveiling the mysteries of attainment to the truth and of certainty, and which is the greatest science of God and the clearest way of God and the most manifest evidence of God. The likeness of the light thereof is as a niche in which is a candle shining with radiance brighter than the dawn. It is the hearth of paradise, having fountains and bows amongst the travelers on this path. So I am very taken by this, and we're going to go into doing some SEs. We're going to do some chanting. I suggest you just do the Hugh chanting, which is something that the Mevlevi dervishes did a lot. So just to be more in that spirit instead of the other things. Sometimes they would chant Allah, who, you. So, but this is just most of the time. Was more for the non-mystical part. The Hugh part is what the mystics did. Okay. So I will read another quote. One of the definitions that I really liked about the Hugh sound was in the Islamic religion, they have the 99 names of God, and these are different qualities of God. And there are way more than 99 names. Some people say there's 1,800, and there's probably even more than that. But the definition I heard that I really liked is that the Hugh sound is all of the names put together. So it's all of the frequency of God, all of the names of God, all of the qualities of God, all of the expressions. And then similar to what we study, you can hear that everywhere, in every sound, in everything. To me, hearing it in the rustling of the leaves is something I remember to do quite often. So I'll read another quote and then we'll do some chanting, the Hugh chants, and then we'll do 20 minutes of silent SEs. Such is the custom of kings. You will have heard of this if you remember. They give Sufis the place in front of their countenance, for they are a mirror of the soul, and better than a mirror, since they have polished their hearts in commemoration of God and meditation, that the heart's mirror may receive the original message. Whoever is born beautiful from the loins of creation, a mirror must be placed before him. The beauteous face is in love with the mirror. It is a polisher of the soul and a kindler of the fear of God in men's heart. So I put in the chat some books that I've read. There's one of the great books in here is the Mathnawi on Kindle is cost only $4, which is, and some of the other books that I mentioned here, I'll talk about. So my Sufi story began in 1976. I had a near-death experience, and I had this very mystical experience during that. I'm not going to talk about that. I put a link in there also about the video where I do talk about that if you're interested. I had been living in Colorado at the time, and I came back to the Northeast to visit my parents, and that's when I had the near-death experience. After recovering somewhat, I went back to Colorado, and my mother kind of bribed me and convinced me to move back east and work for my dad and in an electrical contracting business. So I was living a life of some doing electrical work, mostly estimating, purchasing, running jobs and stuff like that. And the mystical experience of my near-death experience seemed not applicable to me at all. And it wasn't a time when people were talking about that stuff that I knew of. So I was sitting in my apartment one day and someone knocked on the door, and I opened the door and there was this beautiful woman there. And she said to me, "I'm the sister of a good friend of yours, and she told me some interesting things about you, and I wanted to talk to you." And she introduced, in talking, she started talking about Sufism and the Sufi Sheikh, and she introduced me to the Sufi Sheikh. Not that long ago, I realized how amazing this was, that I didn't really do anything to start this process. Someone just showed up at my door and introduced me. So this guy is Reshad Feild, and I put his first book um, in the chat there. He wrote a bunch of books. The first two are in story form that I really like. A lot of the Sufi teachings are in story form, and it seems almost on purpose. They're trying to make it hard to understand and get there, and in a certain way they are. So one of the things she told me about Reshad is that he did these remedies, and I wanted to do it. So I got on the phone with him, and after a couple of minutes of small talk, he said, "I have what I need. I'll send you a remedy." And he sent me, he was really into the Bach flower remedies and things like that. So most of them he made himself. And he said, "You have to follow the instructions exactly." So I did that. And the first night after taking the remedy just 2 times, I had a fever, a very dangerously high fever, and I was really sick. But I was in my glory about this because the woman left his first book for me there, and I read it right away. And he talks about the things of letting go and of burning things off, and I knew my fever was a part of that. And it was just this great experience that I had. I have a quote there that I'm gonna share with you. So this is a quote from that book, The Last Barrier. "So what is the step that all true searchers have to make? It is an unconditional step of surrender. Sooner or later, if we really want to know the truth, we have to give up all our preconditioned notions of what we think we want." Seldom what we want is what we need. We cannot take our limited concepts of freedom into freedom as it is really is. It is not even possible to find the meaning of truth or to learn how we fit into the purpose of life on earth until we reach the time when we can, as the Sufis say, die before we die. To be in the right time and at the right place, we need to have patience and perseverance, living in the eternal question, what can bring about true freedom? So I was loving this, and of course, everyone around me was worried, telling me to go to the hospital, but it was just the beginning of a journey that I've been on ever since. That just really quite remarkable. After that, I decided for about 10 years from then, for that time, I spent time studying with Reshad, sometimes with him in person, sometimes just doing the what they call the zikr, which is the repetition of God's name. And there are specific things they do. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And the other part is reading the Mathnawi every day, which is the Rumi's discourses. And they talk about the discourses in there quite a lot. I met Reshad in person actually back in Colorado. So I went back there because he had a group in Colorado, in Vancouver, Canada, and some in New York City. And right away, he told me, I'm not really your teacher, but you can hang around me until we find your teacher. And he said that to me a number of times, and I would ask him, who's we? And he never answered me. And something he said to me quite regularly over the years is, you don't need to know that. And I've learned that that is a very important thing. And, it's looking back, I know I wanted that information in my mind, and that's not what the Sufis about. It's not what the spiritual teachings are about. The spiritual teachings are more about what we learn in our heart. Okay. So after my near-death experience, I didn't really talk to anyone about it, even though I had this phenomenal experience. I did not know what to make of it. I, I often say the only reference I had for anything like that was in science fiction, a lot in Star Trek. But so Reshad started to talk to me about a couple of things. One was about Mary. And in the beginning, it was like, why is this Islamic person talking about Mary? But in the Islamic religion, Mary is actually mentioned more times in the Quran and many times in the Mathnawi, more than in the Bible. And Mary is considered like the example of the perfect woman in the Islamic religion. But he started to talk about her love of God and her ability to let go of things on the physical level, connect into God and spirit, and her ability to open up to receive the Christ energy. And when he started to talk to me about that, I go, wow, that was what I experienced in my near-death experience. And so then, even I say that now, I feel the energy moving inside of me. So there's something about that feminine point of view that really resonated with me. He also started to talk to me about Jesus. And then it was like, oh, I saw someone in my near-death experience. That's who I saw. And these words still ring very true. And it is always what I believe in. So I have some quotes for this too that I will read to you. So yeah, unless I say otherwise, these quotes are all from the Mathnawi. Mary became selfless beside herself, and in her selflessness she said, I will leap into the divine protection, because that pure-hearted one had made a habit of taking herself in flight to the unseen. Since she deemed the world a kingdom without permanence, she prudently made a fortress of that divine presence, in order that in the hour of death she should have a stronghold which the enemy would find no way to attack. She saw no better fortress than the protection of God. She chose her abiding place in that castle. So we'll do some sharing about what I said, the stuff about Mary and Jesus. Anyone have any insights or anything anyone wants to say? Ronaldo, go ahead.
Thank, thank you. Most interesting. I'm just enjoying what you're saying. I do recall, in terms of my historical readings, that even during the Middle Ages in Christendom in Europe, in different parts, Mary was also quite a prominent figure, as important as Jesus, or even more important in terms of different worshiping services or philosophies. So even in Christendom, there was, in certain parts of Europe, a very strong, let's say, Mary had a very strong following.
Yeah, I didn't know about that historical stuff to after, just something that really touched my heart at that time. And it was like, this was like finally, even though I wasn't in that, I mean, I had read like Autobiography of a Yogi and some things when I was a little bit younger, but it just seemed like this was the beginning of the answer. Um, it was really a great thing. Anyone else want to say anything? Joan, is that you raising?
What is the basis of Sufi? I don't know anything about it beyond, I did Sufi dancing once, but that was
Yeah.
all I know.
Well, there's different sects of Sufis. So the Mevlevi dervishes, and I'll talk about some of the others, but it's the mystical part of the Islamic religion, basically. I happen to have a little card about that too, which is kind of cool. The Sufi is the son of the present moment. O comrade, is it not the rule of the way to say tomorrow? Art not thou indeed a Sufi then? So there's the Mevlevi dervishes, there's the Halaveti dervishes. Those are some, I had some interaction with teacher there. There's a bunch of other different sects of the Mevlevi, of the dervishes. So it's basically, but it's become to mean a lot more than that, where it's not only just Islamic people, basically. So I was talking to a friend and he was saying there was a big Sufi place in New Mexico, and there could have been that I didn't really know about. So I assume there was because he said he spent time there. Any other things anyone wants to say?
Hey, Laurence, Peter here.
Yeah. Hey, Peter, how you doing?
I love you, buddy.
I love you too. I'm glad to see you. You look cool in your glasses and beard and everything. I love it.
Laurence, my question is this. Your Sufi encounter
Yes.
told you that your master was yet to come. So
Yes.
my question is, what was that like when you met your master?
Well, I met my master, who is someone we all know, and it was really nice because I went to a Super 2 in Virginia Beach. It was kind of a cool thing because I started to get involved with Insight, and someone kept saying, "Oh, you should go on discourses." And part of the stuff with the Mevlevi dervishes are doing these readings from the Mathnawi, and so I would check, they are stories and poems, and a lot of times it's a bit of a stretch to get the answer out of there. But I read something that was very specific. It said, do not listen to these discourses with your physical ear. You need to listen to it with your spiritual ear, and don't just trust them. Go meet the person who wrote them. I mean, very clearly. And it just turned out, there was a waiting list for the Super 2. I got in. Someone even gave me a gift for the airplane ticket to go there. And so at the beginning, I hadn't met JR. I went to the back. He was working outside. I was standing near the table, and he stood up and he said, "I'm so glad you came here." He stood up and gave me a hug. And he told me something that, of course, I love to hear, that I was such a good hugger. And it was just so nice. And so that was, and then my thing with the Sufis kind of came to an end, but I see a lot of, Sufi stuff in JR's, and, even some seems very directly taken from the Sufi stuff or connected right to it. So that was, yeah, another great, even that, I just start to get these great feel. I mean, that he taught, I love to hug, so that he told me I was a good hugger would be like, who could say, the best thing someone could say to me. So that was really cool.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then you were drawn into a form of bodywork from
Yes.
there.
Well, it's interesting because I started, I had a minor car accident while I was in the construction business, and I didn't get, nothing really happened. I just had to swerve off the road because someone went through a red light. And the next morning I woke up and my shoulders and lower back were killing me. And I knew it was more stress than, nothing physical happened in the accident. And so I went up to Vermont to see someone who actually, I think right at that time, became a sheikh, this guy Kabir Helminski, who he publishes books and everything. And so he said, you should try a polarity therapy session. And I did, and I didn't know what it was, but he said, you got to try it. So I did, and I just had this great experience of one of the things that happened. I was going to get off the table and complain about how short it was because she said it'd be about an hour, and I looked at the clock, it was 3 hours long. But I had cathartic experience of memories from childhood and all this stuff. So I continued getting polarity therapy treatments, and then when she knew someone near me in Connecticut that was teaching a class, so I started taking the class, and I really loved it. The way that connects here is then I was doing the teacher said she's doing a health fair in Manhattan, and she needed some help because she didn't want to have to do treatments all day for 5 days or whatever it was. So I went there, and I decided I was going to try 2 booths. So this is this health fair. There were like 200 booths there. So, and I went to one. It was this thing you put your head on, it rocks your head to adjust your neck. And the other one was Bertrand. So I met Bertrand there, and he did some body work on me. I said, oh, I need to learn this body work. And then he eventually, told me about MSIA and stuff. So it felt like going to Vermont, and, it was like just everything seemed to line up like that. And then, so then I got involved with doing body work. I studied deep connective tissue massage with him, and have studied other kinds of body work and healing since. Thanks for asking that. Anyone else want to say anything, ask anything?
You have 3 questions for 3 people.
Okay. All right. The hands there. Okay.
I guess I'm talking. So,
Go ahead.
2 questions.
Yes.
One is great sharing. One is what's your experience or understanding, or what in terms of how does traditional Islam deal with Sufism as you view it as?
Yeah.
Is it an amicable relationship? Is it more like whatever is that relationship? And the second question is, in Sufism, is reincarnation a clearly let's call it understanding and part of the philosophy or teaching?
Yes, definitely. The reincarnation is, it was neat before I had ever heard of the term near-death experience, but a lot of what we talked about in the groups was what happened after we died and how to do that in, transition in a conscious way so you can, handle reincarnation better. I'm not that in touch with it, but I have a friend who studies Persian with this woman who's from a traditional Islamic family, and her family is giving her a hard time about her interest in Sufism. So I think like anything, yeah, I'm sometimes amazed and appalled at some of the things people do for any religion, whether it's Christianity or Islam, but especially the way women are treated in a lot of the Islamic countries, because in the pure Islam, it is definitely, and a lot of the Sufi teachers that I worked with, a lot of it was learning how to honor man and woman, to honor each other. And I actually had an interesting experience with the Halavedi dervishes. So they had a place in Nyack, and the head sheikh from Turkey was Musafer. And so he was there one time. And so the thing of Zucker that I mentioned, there's this chanting. So La ilaha illallah, and you do this movement. And so this house was packed. So there were two big rooms here and here, and there was only like an arc with a big opening in it that separated them. But that's a very a little more traditional. In the Mevlevi sect, this is not true, but the men and the women there had to be separate. So I was standing kind of right near the divide of the room, and there was a couple there that I knew, and the woman was over here, the man was here. They could not see each other. And you're chanting, I mean, it really builds up this energy. It's quite incredible, the chanting and this movement. And the guy over here fainted. I mean, it gets really intense. It's not unusual. And a second later, his wife over here fainted, and they could not see each other. And just something in that moment was another understanding about the relationship between man and woman and the balancing of that energy and everything. It's very cool. But yes, there's a lot in the Islamic religion, even in the Quran, about honoring women. And as I said, they talk about Mary quite a lot in there. Doug?
This is great, Laurence. Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it's great to do it, to remember this stuff and do the research. I came across some pictures of these teachers I had never seen before. It was before the internet, as I said. It was really cool.
Yeah, in the 70s. I actually studied with Reshad very closely for about 3 years.
Oh,
Lived
cool.
with him, lived next door to the Boulder Tekya, the house.
Oh, and what years were you there? Maybe we saw each other.
70, well, it was 78. I had graduated college, and my idea of a career was who was my spiritual teacher. And
Yeah.
there was a friend, actually, of Catherine and mine, who had been in my life since college, and she always was the person who would introduce me to my next teacher. And there was studied with the yogis and Tibetan Buddhism, and Reshad was the third. It was sort of like a finishing school in a way.
Yeah.
Anyway, from say 77 to 79, 70, like that. So the thing I would say that really is very close to MSIA is the Hu.
Yeah.
The Hu. It's the foundation of all the Islamic and Sufi prayer. It's our foundation. It's also the foundation of Surat Shabad, which is the names of God that comes from the Sikhs. So in terms of MSIA, JR talked about being in the structure of a mystery school. I think you can really kind of trace back in terms of certainly Mevlana was a great teacher, and he had around him, a group of students. And I think that it's very close. I mean, I see it being very much the same in a way as what MSIA is. I think that it was really close, and this is great that that you're talking about it and sort of opening this door of what came before MSIA. And I ended up going post Reshad. I ended up going down to New Mexico to the Quimby Center and apprenticing there and living there and
Oh, cool.
getting into MSIA. So it's interesting the way we kind of go along.
Yeah. It's nice. I mean, the love is very similar. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
part that, so however you express that, it is great. One of the things that is part of the Islamic religion, that is, there a lot of there's some Sufi schools that really are not Islamic at all. It just became a thing. But to me, the original Sufis come from the Islamic tradition, and there's one of the chanting that we did was La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. And so in the Islamic religion, they do call God Allah, but they do mean the same God we talk about in other religions, like the supreme God. some people try to make it like a different thing, but that's not my understanding at all. So this is a beautiful picture of La ilaha illallah written in Arabic. And so we would say, we would do it in English. No, we would do it La ilaha illallah, and that was the chant that I was just talking about, where the man and the woman fainted. So there are volumes and volumes written about La ilaha illallah and what that means. One of the books I put in there is called Wisdom of the Prophets by Ibn al-Arabi. And he was a person that was part of Rumi's life. But that book is great because it talks about all the different prophets, Moses, Jesus, Abraham, and it really has a great point of view about the teachings of all those prophets in a way that transcends religion. And then I forgot why I was even going to talk about. Oh, but he has something in there that he talks about Mary, that for a moment, that when Gabriel came to her, she, for a split second, she did not turn to God immediately. It took her a moment. And part of what it says in there is that if she didn't, Jesus would have been too arrogant to relate to humans, to man. And there's something about that story that I just really liked. Okay. So I wanted to do some discussing about La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. And some of that is, some of the interpretation is that we have to know separation from God before we could know God. Obviously, some of it is, we worship all sorts of things. Some people worship money. Some people worship other things. I think in this group, we're talking about more subtle things, but I'm going to have us do like a breakout room with 4 people. Or how many people are here? Let's see, whatever would, so there's 30. So 3 people per group would be good, and just talk about that for a little bit. So we'll give, let's see, I didn't plan the time for this. So if we could do, let's see, 9 minutes. So each person would just have 3 minutes, or just have a group discussion for that time. Anyone have anything they'd like to share about what they talked about?
Oh, I had a great conversation, and we ended towards the end talking about the thing I really appreciate about Sufism. And I like to watch a lot of the music on YouTube and some of the Pakistani Sufi music. And people, when I watch the street music, where they play in front of some of the Sufi shrines in Pakistan, people just go into this beautiful, ecstatic, blissful state, and they're not shy about it. It's just completely accepted.
It's part of the culture. Yeah, it's great.
So I just, I guess I kind of wish that we could all go into ecstasy together, and it was totally,
Well, we get to do that when we do SEs. That's right. It's a little different. It's a little more.
Dancing. I mean, I like the dance. Well, I like being able to go into that ecstatic state in the same place like we do with SEs, but not have to be still.
Yeah, I mean, so that reminds me about the whirling, which I kind of learned to do, but never enough to be part of the thing. And so, but there were 2 of them that I participated in doing tech stuff. One was in Vancouver and one was in New York City. But so they do, they're holding up their right hand to receive the spirit, and then their left hand's down to like channel the spirit, and they do the whirling, and it, how they move around the floor has to do with something where the planets and the stars are at that moment. So, and that was, it was always have to be figured, some of it always needed to be figured out at the last second, but a lot of time was spent. So there were, and Reshad was really into Irish folk dancing also, which was kind of fun. But a lot of that was about men and women honoring each other. That part was really nice. Anyone else? Dory, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Did you ever have any contact with Pierre Vilayet?
No, I
I
never
did
did.
at
Oh,
St.
yeah?
John Divine Church,
Oh,
and
cool.
he had a bunch of whirling dervishes there. It
Yeah,
was really beautiful.
right. That's a different sect than the Mevlevi
Yes,
dervishes, but
it
yeah, similar
is.
thing. Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
I've always loved the philosophy and the energy of the whirling dervishes and, the meditations. But I'm happy that you presented this tonight.
It's good.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
There was one time Reshad did something that reminds me in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan. He was teaching a class on sacred geometry, and it was a little above my head. It was kind of an advanced class. And I mean, I'm pretty smart in math and stuff, but I didn't really understand. And he said, you could come. And so I would help, do menial things just to kind of be around him and pick up on the vibe. But a cool thing happened because during one of the breaks, he said, here, come into my office. Definitely always a jokester of some sort. So I didn't know what he meant because he didn't have an office there, but there was a little room. And he held my hands and he squeezed him. He goes, there, you got it. I go, what are you talking about, man? He goes, oh, no, give me your hands again. He goes, there, you got it again. And I definitely noticed after that. So part of the thing that happened in my near-death experience is my hands, and still happens when I touch someone, they become warm. But that really amplified that and increased my intuition quite a lot. So
Wow.
kind of
Thank
mystical
you,
experience.
Aaron. Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. Maria, you want to share?
See. Hi. I
Hi.
just want to thank you for sharing about Mary, Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
I just loved it. I just loved it. I didn't know about that at all.
Oh, really? What? Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
it's something
mean,
that really touched me, that's for sure. Still does. That's great. You're
that's
welcome.
so. Thank you. Thank you for your sharing.
You're welcome. So I'm going to share another story. So when I got married, Reshad did the ceremony, and it was a rose ceremony. It was really another one of there are a lot of things in the Mathnawi about roses and how the scent of the roses is kind of our spiritual part. And it's basically saying, don't just use your eyes to look at what people like, to go to the more subtle thing. But he instructed me to go get 9 closed roses. And so I got them, and he, I had to cut off the stem. And he said, "Get a bowl of water." So during the ceremony, he put one of the roses in my hand, and I had to drop them into my wife's to be at that time hand, and her hands were like this. And then he said, "One is for unity," and then he added another one to her, two's for whatever, I don't remember. So back and forth until at the end, there were 9 of these closed roses in my hands and the bowl of water below. And he said, just let them go. And I let them go. It dropped in the water. All the roses opened up and the room filled with the fragrance of rose. And it was just like such a magical thing. And then he said, taste the water. And it tasted like rose water. And it was just great. He had a really great connection with roses. And that time when I went to Vermont to see Kabir, Reshad ended up coming there. And 3 days before Reshad got there, this rose plant that Kabir had in his house, in the middle of the winter, the roses started to bloom, even though they normally wouldn't do that. Kind of cool things. Let's see. So we're going to get back to the Zucker here a little bit before we get it. So I'm going to share my screen. Another one of the chants that we did was Astaghfirullah, and this is a beautiful Arabic thing saying that, but it means forgiveness. And the definition that I was told that I really like was, forgive me for everything I have done, everything I'm doing, and everything I'm going to do. And it's just, you chant Astaghfirullah. When I did or we did our individual practices, you would say each of these things 100 times per day. The other chanting we did was a you chant. Sometimes it was Allahu, and sometimes just you. So, but there was a cute little joke, and every time it just seemed funny, like a knock knock joke, and people say knock knock, who's there? And you'd say Allah, and then the person would say Allahu, And for some reason, even now, I say this stupid little joke. It's like such a funny thing. Let's see. So another person I want to talk about is Murat Yagan. For a while, I lived in Vancouver, and this guy, Murat Yagan, was there. He wrote this book called I Come From Behind or Beyond Calf Mountain. I put that in the list. As soon as I saw this person, he's just so majestic. I mean, his beard was trimmed perfectly, and just like his posture and everything. And one thing I noticed right away, his fingernails were so beautiful. And it just like he was a prince. And it ends up he was a prince. And he grew up in the Caucasian mountains, the Caucasus Mountains, where he was trained. And a lot of the stories I heard from him are in that book. But the two that really stood out for me is why his nails were so beautiful. As part of his training, there was this giant lump of clay. And to strengthen his hands and arms, he'd have to push his arms in and out. And part of that, after a while, his nails fell off and grew back in this way. They just shimmered. I mean, it was really quite amazing. The other thing that really stood out for me is he would learn how to horseback ride and fight. So he could like ride being on the side of instead of sitting on the horse, he could be on the side of the horse and learn how to shoot like under the neck or, just like out of a movie. And it was just amazing. And this guy was one of the most peaceful people. And he has some other books too, but that really tells a story that I really liked a lot. Another kind of cool thing that happened for me was shortly after, so before I actually met Reshad, I started to have some dreams about this guy with a white hair and white beard, and I kind of assumed it was him. This is the guy who I was having the dreams about, and this is Silly Mundetti, who was Reshad's teacher that I found out about years later. And I have a quote here from him. In order to become human, we need to always be within the divine presence, to be aware of God, to hold him in our hearts. When a human being performs zikr, their spirit, their heart starts to open. Their intelligence becomes more refined and more expansive. Their bodies become healthier. A beautiful condition comes about similar to the one that is brought about by good music. The whole being opens up like a flower, and the divine secret, the things you couldn't understand or know about before, being to be revealed to you. This is why it is necessary to make zikr. For human beings, it is very good. There's quotes about Jesus in the Mathnawi that are kind of good. I'm going to share just one of those. The Jesus of your spirit is present with you. Beg aid from him, for he is a goodly aider. But do not every moment lay on the heart of Jesus the unprofitable work of providing for body full of bones. Seek not you from your Jesus the life of the body. Ask not from your Moses the wish of a Pharaoh. Burden not your heart with thoughts of livelihood. Livelihood will not fail with constant attendance at the divine court. All just amazing things. So I do suggest getting that book. It's $4 on Kindle if you use Kindle at all. It's really a great deal, and you can use the search function in there to look up, any spiritual thing you want to go. You can put in Jesus, breathing, music, whatever is in there. It's really quite a nice thing. Anything anyone else would like to say before we end?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I know it sounds, I don't know, when you spoke about music and not this quote, but the preceding one. But
Yes.
I've been singing several songs a lot lately, and one of them is called Let It Be.
Yeah.
And they were in that song, the refrain is Mother Mary comes to me, speaking her words of wisdom, let it be. And is that
Yeah.
the same is that the reference to the Mary that you've been talking about?
It is for me. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know what
Yeah.
the Beatles meant, but yes.
Yeah. I'm just curious because it's so for some reason, been very powerful for me. And
It
it's
is.
interesting to know that Mother Mary, that the tradition of Mother Mary in the Sufi tradition.
It is a great
Beautiful.
thing, and it is, the part of when you're in a relationship, whatever, we talk about men and women, but whatever your sexual preference is, just honoring each other in that way is when it becomes part of your spiritual process, it's really nice. There were things like you should walk walk with the woman on your left hand in case someone attacks you so you could pull your sword right away. These just kind of, in a story form, just really things that really mean a lot to me, that's for sure.
And Paul McCartney's mother, her name was Mary.
Ah,
She died when he was a teen. And he says that he had a dream. His mother was in the dream. She told him those words. He woke up. He got it at his piano. He wrote the song.
oh, wow,
That's-
cool.
Wow. Wow.
That's funny. One of the links I put in there, Elvis Presley has this song, There's No God But God. And it's like, wow, I saw it's like,
Elvis Presley has a song, There's No God But God.
yeah.
Oh,
And the link, the YouTube link is in the chat there where I put all the books and everything. So.
is there some way I could get that? Because I had my laptop died, and so I had to go to my cell phone, and that's the chat.
Yeah,
chat.
I'll put it in there again.
Okay,
Oh,
thanks so much. Or
does everyone get the chat or not to everyone in meeting? Okay, yep. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I just put all the links in there.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Oh, here I'm interrupting people with their
Go
hand.
ahead, that's fine.
I've thought about this so much. There's no God but God. There's no
Yeah.
God but God. What does this mean? And I'd be curious what you think. The other day, it just came to me. They're not talking. They're not. What? Maybe it means there's nothing but God. Everything
Yeah.
is God.
That would definitely be one of the interpretations. That's a cool thing. Like I said, there are you probably know there are volumes and volumes written about that and what that means, and you could explore it for a lifetime. That's for sure. And that's one of the cool things about the spiritual teachings, that you can do that. The first time I read the discourses, I didn't even notice certain things. When I read it again, it's like, this was in there? I can't even believe it. So I think this is like, and reading all these Rumi quotes again now, I take on a whole new depth of meaning, as I mature and, do more spiritual exercises over the years. It's really nice.
Hey,
Love the sharing. And one of the things that the associations that have come when you've said about the divine feminine, you might say,
Yeah,
that you talked about, for me kind of rekindled or reconnected memories and associations. In Latin America, you have the Virgen of Guadalupe, for example, huge presence in
Yeah.
Mexico. Even where I was born, every February, they have something called La Virgen de Candelaria. So you have all these different Virgin Marys across the Americas that are worshipped at different times of the year,
yeah,
probably connected with indigenous things that were also very important during their historical development. And so it's interesting that in Latin America, a very macho culture in many respects, you have this huge presence of the worship of the feminine principle through these Virgin Mary festivals. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
yeah. The same thing in Islam. I saw this saying, I think she's in the Quran 78 times, in the Bible, it's like 10, you know what I mean? So it's funny. It's cool. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, there was, go ahead.
Marcela, go.
yeah. I
Hi.
was listening to Catherine speaking about there is no God but God, and in my group sharing, we were talking about that, about the God with the small g, and for me, at least, it's like a disconstruction of that God, the God of fear, the God of control, and being
Yeah.
vigilant to go back to the God of our hearts, the God of love. So that's and then complementing to what Michelle was saying about let it be is also a way that I use to let go of the smaller gods and go back to the heart of God, will be letting go and letting God, just giving to the God whatever worries or anything that I have, as a
Yeah.
way of sacrificing, but not from a place of like a suffering, but it's just trusting
Yeah.
in God. So I thought that was interesting how everything was complementing, at least for me, about that. So thank you.
Yeah, it's good. And the end of that quote I really like that I read about, where it's saying you don't have to worry to give your basically success in the world over to Jesus, because if you do your spiritual work, that's going to be taken care of. And that part I just love. So if you keep your eyes and ears and heart on God, good things happen, which is great.
So there were a couple things that came in about the universality of Rumi and the
Yeah.
Sufis. And I think when somebody had asked, well, what's the difference between the Sufis and the Islamic traditionalists?
Yeah.
And are the traditionalists easygoing about the Sufis? And generally, you could say not. So one of the things is that in every mosque, Reshad said there's a little place, it's a corner like with a candle for Mary,
Yeah.
called the Mihrab. And when you think about, and part of it is just the way Islam is sort of characterized, at least in the US, as not being so tolerant. I think that was a hallmark of Rumi, and it's a hallmark of MSIA that
Yeah.
aspects of Sufism, aspects of Judaism and Christianity, and that it's a universal, it's above sectarianism.
Yeah.
And I think that's really such a beautiful message now. I think that that's important. And the last thing was what Catherine mentioned about there is no God but God. What kind of reverberated for me was in the Jewish tradition, they say, with Moses and in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt have no other gods before me, meaning that God, the absolute, that's it. And so the idea of no God but God is that anything else that you're worshiping or putting your faith in isn't it. That you have to keep going and that God will be there and there's only God.
There is only God. So Steve mentioned Mulla Nasrudin, which is all these cute little funny stories. So the Mullah, when he was young, was very smart and wise, but he would get in trouble a lot in school. And so one of his teachers that was like a mystic put this spell on him that he would always say wise things, but people would always laugh. And so there are all these funny little stories. And similar to the Mathnawi, if you read them, sometimes I look at them, it doesn't mean anything to me, but then other times you read them, there are these profound wisdoms in these cute little funny stories about the Mullah. It's great. So, and those books there's a bunch of them available for free online in PDFs. So I think I put a link there, but you can download them. And if you use Kindle, you can download PDFs into your Kindle and have all the function of the Kindle. That's way easier than reading it just in a PDF. Okay, I'm going to end with another quote here. For Jesus' sake, I would yield my life and give my head and lay on myself myriads of obligations to him. I do not grudge Jesus my life, but full well am versed in the knowledge of his religion. Thanks be to God and to Jesus that I have become a guide to the true faith. Amen. Thank you. It was really great. Thanks for all your questions and input. It was really, really nice.